Samantha Theory is a board-certified family nurse practitioner and founder of Happy Body ATX. Her business is dedicated to helping patients live their healthiest, most confident life. With over 15 years of professional experience, Samantha has trained with world-renowned anti-aging, holistic, and biohacking specialists to help provide therapies that balance hormones, prevent disease, and increase immune support. Visit happybodyaTX.com for how to book. The philosophy at Happy Body ATX is that everybody deserves to have a happy body. Hi, my name is Mindy Hofman, and welcome to the Women of Austin podcast, where together we are igniting the power of women's voices. Hi, my name is Mindy Hofman. Welcome to the Women of Austin podcast. Today, we're going to talk about connection. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to dive into this topic. But first, let's start with a little icebreaker. What is something that people would be surprised to know about you?
My name is Heather Emerson, and I'm originally from a little town outside of Austin, but I've resided in Austin for almost 20 years now. I am the founder of a company called Prep to Your Door, and at Prep to Your Door, we do organic plant-based meals delivered right to your door in Austin and Houston. And I think the most special thing about our business is that it's zero waste. So every single week, just like the milkman, we drop off the new food and we pick up the empty containers, and everything stays in a full circle reuse model. To be a part of the Women of Austin podcast is such an honor. The Women of Austin podcast is constantly bringing in women from the community and shouting them out and lifting them up. And I definitely want to be more a part of that in every way I can.
So a lot of people know this about me now, but I think everybody's eyeballs popped out of their head when they found out that I was formerly incarcerated. I spent 12 months in a federal correctional facility at the ripe age of 19.
Whoa!
So, yeah, that's my dirty secret. It's not a secret anymore, though.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ylianna Dadashi, and I'm originally from South Texas, from McAllen, but I've lived here in Austin for the last 8 years. My husband and I founded 2 companies here in Austin. It's a drug and alcohol rehab center, and we provide the full continuum of care from detox all the way to sober living. That's called Infinite Recovery. And our second company is Heartwater, and it's a sustainable alkaline rainwater company. And Heartwater has a 501c3 in which we provide clean drinking water to communities in need. When we picked the name Heartwater, it really came from our hearts, and we wanted to create a rainwater, bottled water company that just had a give back model. So we pour our hearts out into everything that we do. So it's, starts all the way from the capturing of our rainwater to the bottling of it to the 501c3, providing clean drinking water to communities around the world. When I was initially asked by Mindy to be a part of this podcast, she said our topic is about connection. And that really is so big for both my companies, because in drug and alcohol rehab and recovery, you really need to connect to 3 things. So yourself, a higher power, and to community. And then for Heartwater, our tagline's pour your heart out. And so we really, want to pour our hearts out for sustainability, for purpose, and for connection. So I thought it was the perfect topic for today, and I'm just really happy and excited to be able to also connect to women around Austin and entrepreneurs around Austin. So I'm a former Miss Texas. I competed back in 2015, won the title of Miss Texas, and went on to Miss USA. And I think a lot of people immediately think that I grew up doing pageantry, and I actually didn't. I got into pageantry just on a whim. And I ended up, going and winning. So no, I did not do toddlers and tiaras. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just did it on a whim once I was older. Ended up, doing pretty good. So yeah.
Amazing. I love that.
I am Dr. Leah Meuiner, and I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I've lived in Austin since 2000. I am the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Texas. We are a nonprofit that's been in Austin for over 50 years, and we pair children with adult mentors who are professionally trained and supported. I actually went to an all-girls high school, and so I think I've spent my entire adult life trying to find that sense of community again with other women, because it was really special for me and my development, and I think there's just a lot of power in bringing women together to support one another because, the journey of life can be challenging. Well, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and I have been in a country music video singing backup. So
No way!
That's really cool.
So it's like a very Nashville kind of story.
I love that.
I love that.
But I don't think it won any awards or prizes, so you got me beat there. But
We gotta Google it after this.
Yeah,
I know. It's like, I hope you
play
have a
it for us.
copy. I want to see. Okay, so let's start talking about connection. I was, looking into it and doing some research before, and studies have shown that lack of human connection is a greater detriment to health than smoking, obesity, and high blood pressure, and that strong human connection can increase your chance of longevity and lower levels of anxiety and depression. That's a lot. And I know that connection can be, it can come up in different ways. So there are different ways that we can connect. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about how connection has been important in your life. And Heather, I think that it would be great to start with you.
Yeah, so I have probably an unexpected answer to this, but I just actually did a video on how when you change your relationship with food, everything in your life changes. And so when this question about connection, I'm like, oh my God, that's actually what happened to me whenever I learned everything about the food industry. And I guess to sum it up, the reason that I'm so passionate about sourcing locally and supporting local Texas farmers is about having a relationship with your food, because most people don't know what it takes to get that item on the shelf, like where it came from, the humans that created it, the path that it took to travel there. And it used to not be that way. We used to go in our yard, or, if you're a hunter, you would hunt, but you saw where your food came from. And for me, it grounded me. Like quite literally, like being in the dirt grounded me.
Oh, wow.
And whenever I'm having a bad day, for an example, if I go and plant some things, I have serotonin release. So when you said that this lack of connection is more detrimental to our health and obesity and smoking and all these things, I'm like, yeah, because I had a lot of mental health issues before I discovered my connection to food and created that relationship. And I think a lot of people can speak to that story.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for bringing that up, because before these episodes, I always do a lot of digging and research, and that is something that I didn't even come across, and it makes so much sense. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. Ylianna.
Yes. So
tell me.
that relates so much also to a company that my husband and I founded. So it's Heartwater. It's a rainwater alkaline company. And so talking about food and talking about where it comes from, Heartwater is based here in Austin, Texas. It's rainwater. And the reason why we wanted to do a bottled water company was because there's so many different bottled waters that are actually just filtered tap water. And a lot of people don't know that. They're not connected to that. Pretty packaging, you just pick it up on the shelf and buy it.
That's crazy.
And you aren't connected to it. You don't know where it came from. And so I felt like, water being so transparent and authentic, we weren't getting that with our current bottled waters that are currently on the shelves. So we also created, I've struggled with mental health for a long time, depression, anxiety, and my husband is in recovery. And when he and I met, I was Miss Texas, as we just spoke about. I was going around Texas and sharing my story of overcoming depression and being able to find myself in pageantry. And it was very empowering for me. And I didn't know a whole lot about recovery, but seeing my husband do the same thing in the recovery community, I just saw that connection, because every time we would talk about our stories and quite literally pour our hearts out, people would come up to us afterwards and say, wow, I had no idea that, you as Miss Texas, someone who's, doing so well now, had struggles as well. So it was so important for us with, the water to really also make ourselves like water, authentic, transparent. And, in a world where I feel like we're so connected technically, through technology, social media, we're so disconnected. And so the way I designed the bottles as well was to make it kind of like a conversation piece. So if you're drinking the water, you're in a meeting, you set it on the table, people are always kind of like, well, what's that? And that's the feedback I've always gotten as well.
I love it, and I love that you talk about the that your husband was in recovery, and that you also found some of the same things, and you guys could relate to each other. I myself am in recovery, and I always joke that I think that every grown-up should get a little chance to go to rehab, because you get to stop and take a break from your life, and it's all about you, and then you get to focus on the other people, and they teach you that the best part to one of the best ways to help heal yourself is to start focusing on others. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's true for everybody, and a lot of the lessons are true.
Absolutely.
And connection, man, it's very important. Leah, you definitely create connections with what you do. And
yeah, it's interesting because now I am literally in the business of making connections. So in the fall, I started as CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters Central Texas, and that is all we do. We match mentors, bigs, with mentees, littles, and support them, train them, give them all the resources they need to make a meaningful and lifelong connection. Yeah. And for a lot of the kids that we serve, they do not have as many adults in their lives or supports in their lives. About 70% live in single parent homes. About 40% have an incarcerated parent. And so this is a way for a big to walk alongside them as they go through the journey of childhood and adolescence and beyond. And what has really touched me since I started this job is hearing from people who have been connected for over 40 years. We've been in Central Texas for 50 years. Yeah, and wow. I talk to folks who are like, oh yeah, I've been with my little 30, 40 plus years. They've been in one another's weddings. They've helped, be the grandparents to that next generation of kids. And so I feel really blessed to be in the position to hear these stories. And I am so grateful that we're out of lockdown and isolation now, because I feel like that power of connection, I don't think any of us realized how important it was until we didn't have it anymore. And so now to be able to reignite that spark of interpersonal connection is something we can all appreciate a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, Ylianna, that you also have recovery centers. And would you call it recovery center or rehabs? Or
rehab, recovery center. It's the full continuum of care. So we start with detox, inpatient, PHP, IOP, sober living. And unfortunately, there was a huge influx of, I say unfortunately, because there was a huge influx of admissions to the center, but fortunately we're there to help. And one of the biggest things, I love talking to our clients that come in and seeing them in detox and then seeing them as they grow and go through the steps of recovery is during the pandemic, mental health was such a big thing. And so, what else do you do if you're suffering from drug and alcohol addiction? You isolate and use at home alone, and you don't have that support system. So, Infinite, really, we've grown so much just through the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that you could be there, and I'm sure all of your patients are grateful. Or what do you call them? Patients, or is it?
We call them clients.
Clients.
Yeah.
I've been one. I don't even know. I think that I know that when I was isolating and I was going, I was spiraling, I would want to be alone, and then I'd get a little tipsy, and all I would want to do was talk to people. I'd call my mom or call my friends, and it didn't make any sense to me, but I was just dying for that connection. But I needed to medicate to get there. It's crazy. I've had a lot of therapy and learned a lot about it, and I really was excited to do this episode because it's important to be intentional. MindBar is the master class of mental health. MindBar has raised the bar on mental health by gathering the best mental health leaders to teach you the tools of therapy and coaching through self-paced classes around your schedule. The best news is, if you love a coach or therapist, you can book one-on-one sessions with them directly through the platform, taking the frustration and high cost out of the process of finding the right therapist for you. At MindBar, you will learn to end negative cycles, improve your relationships, and manifest a better future, all for just $14.99 a month. Visit mind-bar.com to get started. Precision Camera and Video is a locally owned Austin business that you can trust for all of your photography and videography needs, from camera equipment rentals, a robust used gear section, service and repairs, a full-service photo lab, and photography classes. With 40 years tradition of integrity and personal service, Precision has a knowledgeable staff that is passionate about photography and education. Precision Camera has 2 locations, one on Anderson Lane and one at South Park Meadows Shopping Center, or online at precisioncamera.tx.com. Hi, my name is Mindy Hofman, and I'm the founder of Women of Austin. At Women of Austin, we have our podcast, and we have monthly get-togethers where all are welcome, and we celebrate female friendships and connections. It was really important to me today to talk about connection, because connection is so important. Without it, our health and well-being suffers. And I went through a point in my life where I needed help, and when I finally asked for help, the thing that I didn't know that I needed that saved me really was connection. So I'm really excited to have these guests here today so we can talk about this and share our stories. We're shooting at EBERLY today. It's on South Lamar. It's so amazing and it's beautiful, and come visit them. They would love to see you. And I want to read this quote from Brene Brown, who says, "Connection is why we are here. It is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives." And she goes on to talk about how people are sometimes afraid to connect because they're afraid of people seeing who they really are, of being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to hear, Heather, what you think about that. And
Brene Brown is
me too.
She's my superwoman mentor. She doesn't know it, but she is. And people ask me, what is your superpower? One of them is vulnerability. And I learned that because I realized that is a form of connection. Yeah. I will say that when you have trauma, and most of us do on some end of that spectrum, there is such a thing as oversharing, and that's not the same thing as vulnerability. So I want to make that distinction for anybody who's listening. It's not that you did anything wrong by oversharing. I speak because that's my story. When I first started talking about being incarcerated, I had kept that in for over a decade, and then I started telling everybody. And so I was like, oh wait, that's not vulnerability. That's the opposite of isolating, right?
Yeah.
It really is. I think about this a lot, that we're so scared for people to see who we really are.
Yeah.
We're so fearful of rejection or judgment and abandonment, and I have all of those things. And so, in the words of Brene Brown, be brave, be vulnerable.
Yes, that's a lot. I didn't even think that you could be too vulnerable or overshare like that. So once again, thank you for showing us that viewpoint.
It's about intentional and mindfulness, right? Mm-hmm. There's no right or wrong way. It's just being intentional and mindful. And I wasn't being. Yeah. So that was my awakening.
And Ylianna, have you ever been in a situation where you've had to be vulnerable and you were scared or nervous about what people would think? And
absolutely. And I'm kind of happy as well that we're doing this podcast on connection, because, not to go back into the pandemic, but I had my son, my firstborn, at the very beginning of the pandemic. Or I guess before. So January 2020, had my son. Unfortunately, it was an emergency C-section. Oh. So as soon as, the 6 weeks was up and I had just healed from the C-section, we go straight into lockdown.
Oh, man.
And so I'm a new mom, trying to raise my first son. And, I had this whole idea of like, oh, he's going to be around family and we're going to have so much fun going to the parks and everything. And I, for the first 6 months of his life, it's just like complete isolation, not knowing, how to raise a baby on my own, but learning as we go. And I got postpartum depression. It really kicked in. And I think a lot of people don't know that about me, but I'm excited to share that, of course, working with a therapist, talking to my mom, talking to my family, getting that connection once again, whether it's virtual or, luckily I was able to go visit my parents who don't live in town, and being with them and connecting to them. I really learned through, the pandemic and through that isolation, because I was so scared of my son being, getting sick, newborn baby. We didn't know what was going on, at the beginning of the pandemic. I learned that humans are social creatures. And so just being able to, say, to learn, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
But also, talking about vulnerability and authenticity and sharing, I don't think I'm doing too well personally myself. And I need, help. I need outreach. I need to outreach, to a therapist or whatever it was. I think, through the pandemic, I grew and learned a lot about myself because I needed connection.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. It's very personal, and all of you up here being so vulnerable. It's just beautiful to see, and it's nice to know that we're not alone. Right. It's all different ways that we felt disconnected, but here we are talking about it and realizing that it happens to all of us. Leah, I'd love to hear any experience that you've had with this.
I know it's cliche, but it's really true. In this age of social media, I think that ability to be authentic and vulnerable is even more important, because and I'm raising 2 teenagers. And my daughter is about to go off to college. She's about to turn 18. So especially for her as a young woman growing up in this filtered, airbrushed age, modeling that authenticity and vulnerability, because I recognize that even as an adult, I have a hard time sometimes recognizing that, no, I am not the only mom struggling with that, or the only, professional woman struggling with this challenge because of the polished images I see around me. So I can't even imagine how a teenage brain deals with that. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. And the other thing I was reflecting on this morning, I try not to ever think about my dissertation research, because that's also kind of like one of these traumas that you get through and then you're done and you don't repeat it. But it was all about connection. It was between the connection that you see between a mom and a very young toddler. And I won't bore you with the details, but the bottom line was, even when a mom had just depressive symptoms, not even clinical levels of depression, that affected her connection with her toddler and what you could measure with eye contact, verbal contact, et cetera. And so it's just interesting to reflect upon how connection shapes us so early from our birth. And so to be able to surround ourselves with people that can help us foster that, with our children or with the other people in our lives is so important.
How do you think that people who are struggling to find connection, or, to someone who's watching this who might be feeling alone, what would you suggest to them as far as the first steps to getting back to getting out there and creating those connections? I'd love to hear if any of you have any advice or thoughts on that, because it's tough. It's tough.
I was actually, thinking about this and talking about this with my husband, because we have a very open relationship, and, we just love reflecting and talking about, things that are relevant, and connections very relevant to the recovery community. But, what he was telling me about his recovery, he's 13 years sober this year, nice. Was he said, I need to connect with myself first to then be able to have an authentic relationship with other people. And, one of the biggest things at Infinite Recovery is having that full continuum of care, because what my husband said was, if you go to a rehab center, and I'll just, put it like this, you're going for 30, 60, 90, then you have to go to a different sober living, then you have to go to different therapy, and you're always constantly, changing these, therapists. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but what we've seen at Infinite is there's such a higher success rate, with the full continuum of care, because you establish that connection right at the beginning, and you're staying with the same people, you're staying with your same therapist and everything. Yeah. But it starts with yourself, and then connecting to a higher power, whatever that is, whether it's God, universe, whatever you believe in, a higher power, a higher connection, to be able to authentically, vulnerably connect with other people, to not put on a facade.
Wow, that's really well said, and I think it's really important for people to start to think about and check in with sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, am I connected to myself? It's easy to get farther away from it if you're not being mindful.
Exactly. Mindfulness has so much to do, just with all aspects of life, and that's like one of the biggest things that we try to practice at home. We're trying to teach our 2-year-old already how to just, be mindful, but also check in with yourself.
Located 45 minutes from Austin on Lake LBJ, the club at Horseshoe Bay Resort has been a hill country oasis for over 50 years. Endless amenities, 4 award-winning championship golf courses, tennis, pickleball, spa, marina, sunset cruises, fitness, multiple pools and restaurants, including Cap Rock, voted best new clubhouse, with breathtaking views of the hill country, lake, and golf courses. Horseshoe Bay Resort. We would like to thank our community sponsors. ZATE. Create the date ahead of time, a new way to date in Austin. Download the app and go on your next ZATE. At ZATE app. Magic Robot. Does your company use Salesforce? Get valuable hidden data that only Magic Robot can deliver. MagicRobot.com. Elite Marquee and Events. High-quality LED marquee letters and more to help create an unforgettable celebration. at Elite Marquee Austin. EBERLY, a thoughtful collection of dining, drinking, and thinking spaces. And where we filmed this episode, EBERLYAustin.com. Well, I think that that's a good place to wrap it up because we're out of time. But I feel like I need to rewatch this a few times. And you guys really gave some great advice. And thank you so much for being here. And I hope to see you all back on another episode sometime soon. I'd love that.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for connecting us. This was fantastic.
Yes,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women of Austin podcast. A new episode premieres twice a month right here on the Women of Austin channel. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you never miss an episode. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at women_of_Austin. My name is Mindy Hofman. I hope you'll join us for our next episode of the Women of Austin podcast. Light it up, light it up.